Hi everybody, welcome. My name is Linda Abraham and I am the President of EXUDE and the moderator for today's webinar. I want to welcome all of you to the 10 Commandments of MBA Interviews to be presented by Natalie Greenblatt-Epstein. Before we start, a few housekeeping items. Natalie is going to ask questions throughout the webinar and ask you to raise your hand in response at different points. You can do so by clicking on the hand icon, two icons underneath the horizontal orange arrow on your control panel. Please raise your hand when you've found it. Nobody found it? And waving your hand in front of the monitor won't do the job. You need to click on that icon. Ah, Rami, you got it. Ah, Vivek, good, good. And good, more. Francis, all right. Angie, Alex, great. All right. Thank you. All right, so most of you have found it. Raising hands allows you to respond to our questions. What about your questions? We have left time at the end of Natalie's presentation for questions, and she will answer them then. If you have a general question or you run out of time before answering today, you can post it on EXUDE's Facebook page or on our LinkedIn group. The Facebook page is facebook.com/EXUDE, and the LinkedIn group is a somewhat more complicated URL, linkedin.com/company/EXUDE.com. And again, any URLs that we refer to, we will send you later, so you don't have to go nuts writing them down. Final 2 points, we will announce a special offer for those of you who are here today at the end of the presentation. And when you leave, you will receive a brief survey. Please fill it out. Actually, the offer is both an offer and a contest. But getting back to the survey, we do respond to your survey. We consider them, and they help us improve and provide content that you're actually interested in. So please fill it out. We value your feedback. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce, I do want to, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Natalie Greenblatt-Epstein, who will present the 10 Commandments of MBA Interviews. Natalie has served as the B-School Admissions Director at the University of Michigan, at Cornell Johnson, and at Arizona State University. She brings enormous insight and perspective on the MBA application process, and specifically on the MBA interview, to our webinar today. Without further ado, Natalie Greenblatt-Epstein and the 10 Commandments of MBA Interviews.
Linda, thank you so much for the introduction. I have to tell all of you, when I was coming up with the title of this presentation, I just kept thinking about admissions, and admissions is truly my religion. So I too want to thank you for joining us for this webinar on the 10 Commandments of MBA Interviewing. As a former admissions director and dean, I've conducted well over 10,000 interviews and coached hundreds of successful clients in my 6 years here at EXUDE.com. So interviews come in a variety of packages for those of you who have already had your interview invitations. Some of them are by invitation. Some of them are open, where you can go in and actually just meet and schedule an interview, and some of them are hybrid. You get to, meet in the beginning of the year. You get to wait for an interview at the end of the year. Some of these interviews are blind, some are non-blind, some are on campus, some are off campus, some are done through Skype. There are also different segments now of interviews. When I first started out in admissions, we only did traditional interviews. Now, there are also team-based discussions, there are video essays, there are case-based interviews, and some schools, in fact my alma mater, are using improv games for part of their interview sessions. So it's a good thing I have a theater background as well, because I know how to do the improv games, and it does come from my alma mater, and we're happy to help you here at EXUDE.com for any of the services that I named. Because case-based interviews and improv games are a little bit more complicated, we're going to concentrate today's session on traditional interviews, team-based discussions, and video essays. Do note that if Wharton has extended you an offer to interview for their first round, we are holding a mock team-based discussion on November 17th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. My goal at the end of this webinar is to give you an understanding of what the admissions committee expects from an applicant. But quite frankly, it all boils down to fit. And what I want to do is give you an idea of how you can demonstrate that fit. I will use 5 5 minutes to get to know you. And then what I want to do is use 5 minutes to share my ideas on the video essays, 10 minutes on team-based discussions, and 20 minutes on traditional interviews, because truly the bulk of schools are still using the traditional method. Then I'll open up the webinars to questions that you have. And in fact, you should be taking notes throughout this, because as Linda mentioned, there will be a grand prize winner at the end of the session. And that grand prize is actually a service that we provide that's worth $435. We also have a special offer for all participants who stay for our session. So despite the fact that we'll be posting this up later, take notes now so that you can have a chance to win that $435 valued service. All right. As I said before we begin, I'd like to get to know my audience. So in the question box, please let me know where you currently live.
And if you could state either city and country or city and state, if you're in the United States, that's what we're interested in. So let us know where are you located? Ventura, California, local, welcome. Halifax, Canada, Atlanta, Georgia, Washington, D.C., Memphis, Tennessee, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, all over the country, southeastern U.S., San Antonio, Bangalore, India, all right, outside the country too, near San Francisco, American Canyon, okay, I haven't heard of that one, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, RSM, California, Rancho Santa Maria probably, New Delhi, India, Shanghai, China, Sanidhya, India, Bangalore, Chicago, quite a group, really all over. And anybody from Europe? I didn't see Europe.
Those who are watching this early in the morning or really, really late at night. So
yeah. I don't see anybody from Europe here. We don't have any Europeans this time. We got South Americans, Asian, America, North America. Got a pretty good representation, but I don't think we have anybody in Europe. I didn't catch that, but maybe they'll join us later. Okay.
All right. Now let's just test out our technology a little bit. So I'm going to take a poll. And what you'll do is click on the radio button, okay? Which of these options best describe you? Where are you in the process, okay? I've been invited to interview. Do you have that poll up, Linda?
Yes, the poll is up.
Okay.
And we have 30 voted. We're getting, all right, everybody's, we got a participatory group today. That's great. All that exercise did it. We're at about 67%. Can we get it up? Let's get it up. Come on. 71%, 75%. Can we get up to 80%? I'm going to count to 5. 1, 2, 3. Come on. One more. 4, 5. Okay, we're going to close it. Almost 80%. Okay. And here are the results. Okay. So 22% have been invited to interview. 17% have applied and are waiting to hear if they are invited to interview. 35%, that's the plurality, are applying round 2 or 3 and just want to understand the process. And 26% have no plans for this year but are thinking about the future.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think it's great to prepare early. You can never prepare too early, so thank you for coming again. With that, let me just tell you about my first commandment. The first commandment is, thou shalt know thyself. This is especially important for video essays. With Kellogg, Yale, and Rotman asking you to conduct a video essay after you hit the submit button, you need to be on your toes and ready for anything. They'll ask you questions as common as your greatest accomplishment, which you should have probably already thought about when you were writing your essays, or the contribution you'd like to leave the school, to questions as silly as, what is your favorite dessert? I've heard that from one of my clients. And most recently, a client told me that he had the question, what is the one word that describes you? Well, I don't know about you, but I can't boil down one word that describes me. Like, can you really boil down all your traits into one word? It better be a really good word. And the nice thing is that you do have some time after the video essay question to explain why you chose that word, and that really is the purpose of the video essay explaining the word if it's a one-word answer, explaining why you answered the question that way. The point of the video essay is that you have to be ready regardless of what they ask you. You can practice questions. You can practice as many questions as you want, but the AdCom always creates new questions. So practicing thinking on your feet with friends, families, or of course your EXUDE.com consultant will certainly help you with those video interviews. My second commandment is know thy school. This is very important for Wharton's team-based discussions. They give you a scenario that's related to the school, so you really have to understand Wharton and what they offer in order to make your one-minute pitch. They put you into a room when you're there with your competition, who become your best friends at the end of the session, and two observers. In Philadelphia, it's student observers. Outside of Philadelphia, it's usually AdCom. And then you're given 1 minute to introduce yourself and your idea. And that typically requires fixing a problem at Wharton. So they present for you something that they have. They get a lot of their curriculum this way, which is wonderful. A lot of their alumni curriculum, a lot of their current curriculum this way. I think it's a smart move on their part. And the trick, however, is not really about fixing the problem at Wharton. The trick is working together with your 5 newest friends to figure out how to move the team forward towards a common goal. This is not as easy as you think because MBAs are type A's. They're extremely competitive. They believe that their concept, if Wharton selects their concept, or if their team, if the team selects their concept, that they'll be the person that's selected for admission out of the group. And I will tell you from experience, that cannot be further from the truth. The observers are watching you for how you act on the team. You might come up with a great concept and they might steal it from you, and that's okay. But they're really interested in the role you play on the team. Are you able to move the team forward towards the goal, or do you give up when Jane Smith takes over the conversation? Make certain that everyone on the team understands the goal of the exercise. I have everybody that participates in our mock team-based discussion take turns being the facilitator and making certain that everyone on the team understands the goal of the exercise, that you divide out your roles and responsibilities, that you have open communication, and for those who don't communicate, those who decide to, hang up the towel and sit back, that that you engage them in the conversation. Also ask questions about the topic that you choose. The most important thing about the process is that you select an idea and that you build on that idea in the 35 minutes. Don't meld all the ideas together, but build on the idea that all of you as a team have selected on, so that when you come out of the process, it's actually a better idea than the one that was initially presented in the beginning. You will add tremendous value if your team can actually come up with a solution that all of you buy into, and that you present the solution to the observers at the end. I know, again, from the rumor mill that only about 20% of the teams actually wind up doing a presentation. I would leave 2 minutes at the end to do presentation, and that has been incredibly impressive to the observers. Moreover, they will ask you at the end of the team-based discussion how you felt about the team. Be honest. Understand the strengths and weaknesses of the team without blaming one team member if the team happens to be dysfunctional. And again, with my clients, when they get into the real deal, over half of them have reported that their team was dysfunctional, but because they did the team-based discussion with us, they were able to move that dysfunctional team into a functional team. And that's really important. That's a really important skill to have, because you'll need that in business school. Again, if you want to practice your team-based discussion, we're holding our next session on November 17th. And it is easier to fail with us than to work with us and to gain feedback with us and to make that dysfunctional team functional during a mock interview than it is doing it at Wharton or winging it on your own. So with that, I'm going to move on to traditional interviewing, because while we know that your application, your skills are equally important, traditional interviews still are conducted at most of the schools. So our third commandment, as you can see, is use examples. Using examples can make or break your interview. I'm going to talk a little bit about frameworks here, because frameworks are your friend. They're important for your essays, but they're equally important for your interview because they help the interviewer connect with you. And they help you stay on topic and not go off on tangents. 3 frameworks that I like to use are STAR, PAR, and GRIP. I use STAR for positive examples, PAR for negative examples, and GRIP for team-based questions. Did any of you, show of hands, catch the GRIP framework I used when I was explaining the Wharton process in the last commandment? Show of hands.
Show of hands, anybody? A couple. Yeah.
Good. All right, great. So again, anytime the interviewer asks you a behavioral question, describe a time, tell me about a time, or when, you can say in your head, for example, use a framework. STAR equals situation, task, action, and result. The results should be quantifiable. You've increased revenues, you decreased costs, you've increased efficiency, you decreased cycle time, you increased customer satisfaction, you increased safety, you increased shareholder value, you increased market share, something. Okay? You should have a delta when you use the result. The delta is the difference between the status quo, what happened before you became part of that project or part of the organization or part of that team, and your intervention, the change that you made in the organization. So remember back to your high school math and use your delta. Okay? PAR equals problem, action, result. And again, I use that for negative questions like, tell me about a time when you had a team that was dysfunctional. Or tell me about a time when you made a mistake. Okay? Again, the result needs to have a quantifiable outcome. And GRIP, which I learned when I was at Michigan before it was Ross, was a product of Professor Noel Tishy's genius, and that equals goals, roles, information, and process. Functional teams versus dysfunctional teams, basically. And a functional team holds tight. It's a grip. When one of those areas slip, goals, roles, information, or process, if you don't know the goal of your team or the organization and it slips, you have dysfunction. If someone doesn't know the roles or responsibilities that they have on the team, they don't know that they're the expert, or they don't know that they're the leader. And I know a lot of you have had that situation where your leader doesn't step up and become a leader, and so somebody else becomes a leader by default. That sometimes can be correctable if the person who steps up to be the leader becomes the leader, and sometimes it can't be. So what happens when you have a member of the team that doesn't know his or her role? You can put your answers in the question box. Do you know what happens when there's no communication or there's no process on a team?
Conflict. EK says conflict.
Good.
Aditya says it's rudderless. Rami says nothing gets done. Angie says everyone runs around in different directions and productivity just goes down.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's dysfunctional. You want to make the team functional, and that's really important. Okay.
For results and frustration. Yeah. Okay, yeah. You guys got it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for participating in that. Interviews to me are very much like blind dating. Your goal is to get the interviewer to want to spend his or her time, his limited time, having a 5-course meal with you rather than a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, a bottle of water, whatever. Frameworks help you stay on point, so use your frameworks. My fourth commandment is listen. I've often, in fact, my mother accuses me of this all the time, of talking too much, too little, but I never do that in an interview. You've rehearsed. You need to be succinct. Think about it, cut it in half, and sometimes you have to cut it in half again. If you see your interviewer yawning, you are in big trouble. Use the frameworks to mitigate this issue and use the 80-20 rule, and I'll talk a little bit more about this on the next commandment. Moreover, listening to the question is really important because a lot of people don't necessarily listen to the question that the interviewer is asking you. They have a preset script that they're going to use, and they're not actually listening to the nuances of the question. I'll give you an example of that. To me, there's a big difference between a question about failure and a question about setback. Okay? A failure is something that's unrecoverable, but you're able to learn from that experience, and then the next time you're able to apply that learning to something else, and that's how I would answer a failure question. A setback or a mistake is something that you can fix. It's something that's easily fixable while you're doing your activity, your project, your presentation. Listen intently to the question, and quite frankly, if you don't understand what they're asking, ask them for clarification. There's nothing wrong with it. No harm, no foul. I've often been asked to clarify my question, and there is nothing wrong with that. Don't feel like you should answer something that you don't quite understand, or that you didn't understand the nuances for. Okay. My next commandment is thou shalt behave appropriately. This is probably my biggest pet peeve. You have to be polite and nice to everyone you meet. I have denied admission to people who've been rude to my receptionist, to my students, to the operations team, or quite frankly to anyone associated with the school. This information gets back to the admissions director, I have to tell you, in one form or another. I have always heard about someone's attitude, no matter what they offered. That, you know, they could be the greatest thing since sliced bread. I would deny their admission because of their attitude. That person did not fit well into my program. Another piece of information I'm going to give you is don't drink alcohol at a reception, or most recently, I had this come up with a client last week. Actually, it was earlier this week, I think. He was invited to a wine bar for his interview and asked me what he should do because I told him, don't drink. Like, don't drink. Stay sober. But you're invited to a wine bar. What do? I did tell him to order a glass of wine, but don't take more than 1 or 2 sips of the wine, and the rest of the time drink water. Don't get drunk at a reception, please. If you're drunk, you're dead to the committee. Drunken behavior will send you walking. Be appropriate at every meeting. On the day of the interview, if it's a live interview or even on a Skype interview, arrive 5 to 15 minutes early, not an hour early, particularly with a live interview, because then the receptionist has to entertain you, and that's not what the receptionist wants to do. But do get there 5 to 15 minutes early, and even if you got there an hour early, walk around campus a little bit or just hang out in whatever common areas they had before you go into the interview room. Okay? Show during the interview an appropriate body language. I mean, don't cross your arms, fold your arms over, don't cross your legs, keep them tight together, but you know, never put your feet on a desk. I've had somebody do that to me before as well. But you do need to show appropriate body language, and that is open body language. You can use your hands to talk, but don't use it to emphasize something. Don't consistently use your hands to talk, as I'm doing now, but you can't see me, so it doesn't really matter. Handshakes are also incredibly important. This is kind of like Goldilocks and the 3 bears. Not too hard, not too soft, not a wimpy handshake, but medium, just right. And I will tell you that at one point there was a woman who had the hardest handshake I have ever had in my lifetime, and she broke 2 of my fingers. It hurt. I still did the interview, and then I went to the hospital later to get them wrapped up. So, so practice your handshake with people. If you tend to sweat, if you have sweaty palms in particular, or sweaty brow, take a handkerchief with you. And it's cold and flu season right now, so that won't hurt you either. If you didn't take a handkerchief, cough or sneeze into your elbow, not your hand, because you're going to shake the person's hand at the end of the interview as well. And nobody wants those germs, and that's going to affect their impression of you during the interview. So take a handkerchief or a piece of Kleenex with you. And with the sweat, it does absorb the sweat, and if you have a sweaty brow, you can pat your brow. I did have a client last year who even the handkerchief didn't work, and so we actually used cornstarch initially. That didn't work, and then we used antiperspirant on his hand, and then sort of wiped it off so it wasn't sticky before his interview. So if you have that problem, use whatever you can beforehand. And if you find yourself sweating on your brow, then wipe your brow with your handkerchief or with your tissue. I always tell my clients to wear conservative attire no matter what, even if the interviewer is showing up in jeans, with he or she shouldn't, but it happens. They wear conservative attire, suits for men and women, conservative suits. Nothing funky, like no cartoon ties, but if you want to wear like the school tie with their mascot, that's okay. I usually just say, dress down in, nice red tie with a dark gray, dark blue suit. No ties for women, but for men. And women, it's fine to wear skirts and blouses or a pantsuit. Just, make sure your shoes are clean and polished as well. People do look at the shoes. And please, please, please make sure you get a good night's sleep before the interview. And if you're a coffee drinker, drink coffee in the morning, but have a mint afterwards or brush your teeth afterwards. So, so that's my appropriate behavior, my appropriate behavior commandment. This is our 6th commandment. Okay, demonstrate energy. This is kind of what Linda was trying to get at in the very beginning. Enthusiasm is absolutely contagious, so be positive about everything. And if you need to generate some energy, go into the bathroom before your interview and jump up and down to get the blood flowing, because it's really, really important. That energy will feed into the interviewer and give them energy. Also, with the positivity, with the optimism, be a company person. Even if they did terrible things to you, never say anything negative about your company. If you're asked about other schools to which you've been applying, you don't need to downgrade the other schools. For example, if you're applying to Chicago Booth and Kellogg, and you're interviewing at Chicago Booth, there's no need to downgrade Kellogg in order to uplift Booth. Just talk about how Booth is great. Never, ever, ever complain. Even if your flight was late, if you couldn't find parking, don't complain. That's the worst thing that can happen. Again, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. So demonstrate energy, be positive. It's a really important commandment. Our 7th commandment is engage the interviewer. Remember I mentioned the 80-20 rule? You can ensure that the interview will be more conversational and less of a monologue by enabling the interviewer to speak 20% of the time. And I'm not talking about just asking you the questions. You should really try to make it conversational. They should really try to make it conversational, but sometimes they don't. You can do this by asking questions throughout your interview. You can even do that walking through your resume. For example, one of you said that you lived in Mumbai. So when you're walking through your resume, you can say, I grew up in Mumbai, I live here now. Have you ever been to Mumbai? Especially if you're doing like a Skype interview. So and you can do that with some of your activities. Have you ever been mountain climbing? Have you ever been to this city? Have you ever, baked a cheesecake? That kind of thing. Okay. And if you work for like a tech company, you can say, have you ever, heard of Google Loons? I had never heard of them until one of my clients brought it up, and I thought it was great. So I asked more about it. So, so that was part of the conversation. All right. Our 8th commandment goes without saying. You need to exude confidence, honesty, and quick thinking. With confidence, I tell my clients to use visualization techniques to help them with their confidence. Think about your success ahead of time. You can even storyboard it or whiteboard it. I like to think about myself in the program. So think about yourself in the program, sitting in the classroom, being part of a club, going out with your peers at the school. Think about that. Project yourself into that. Don't think, oh my God, these people are so smart. There's no way I'm ever going to get in. Think about, I belong here. You need to exude confidence without the arrogance throughout the interview. And actually, you could do this best by quantifying your achievements. So I talked about quantifying things earlier, and you can quantify your achievements and be very proud of your achievements. Even when you're describing a failure, you don't have to berate yourself to take ownership of your failure. You just talk about what you learned from it and how you've moved on. Again, these are things I coach my clients to do, and they do very well in our interview sessions. The second part of this is honesty. I actually had to fit 3 commandments. Since they were only 10 commandments, I had to fit 3 into 1. So pardon me for this, but I had 12 commandments, so very similar to Mel Brooks. Anyway, I had applicants that not only exaggerated their achievements on their resume, but they outright lied on their application, and these will, in fact, have dire consequences, because if you're admitted to programs, sometimes they do background checks, and so you need to be really, really honest. So this was an applicant who came to our program to interview, and I switched interviewers at the last minute. But the client had indicated that he had fluency in Spanish, and the interviewer that I switched with was a student who was from Latin America and spoke fluent Spanish, and he conducted part of the interview in Spanish just to see if the person had fluency in Spanish. The person had no fluency in Spanish. And so that is not a good thing to put on your application or on your resume, and particularly with the schools that are just using your resume for blind interviews. So be honest with everything that you do. Finally, there are some questions that you will never be able to prepare for because they come out of nowhere. Take a minute to think about the question. I often tell my clients to bring a bottle of water with them, unscrew the top, tell the interviewer, that was a great question, let me think about it, and then use that time to think. Sip the water, that gives you a little extra time, and then you can answer the question. The silence is more deafening to you than it is to the interviewer. In fact, the interviewer is probably jotting down notes and is really very thankful for the silence. So if you really can't answer the question and you really need to think about it, don't be afraid to say, that's a great question, let me think about it, and use that time to really think about your answer and put it into a framework. Thinking on your feet doesn't mean that you need to answer the question immediately, but it does mean you can handle anything that they throw at you. So again, put the answer in a framework. You should be able to answer the question for which you didn't prepare. Okay? And that goes into my 9th commandment, and that's preparation. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Read everything that you can about the school. Review your entire application. Make sure you remember what it says. You should be off book on your interview. You should know on your resume. You should know your resume by heart. talk to students, talk to faculty, talk to alumni, get as much information as you can. Go to their events, even online events. A lot of schools hold online events. MIT holds them every other week. Any time that you can get information, get information. The other thing you need to do is practice your interview. Practice with friends, practice with family. You'll practice in front of a mirror on your phone so you can, listen to your answers. A lot of websites out there offer you, the questions that other candidates went before you, like GMAT Club sometimes offers questions that candidates had, and you can go to those websites and see what some of those questions are. And when you're done with the interview, add your information to the website so that you're paying it forward. And of course, you can always turn to EXUDE.com for mock interviewing and coaching. We have, again, I've done 10,000 interviews, so I pretty much know all the questions that are going to come at you, and so most of my colleagues. So they're great at doing this as well. Prepare. Okay, 10th commandment, last commandment. You need to follow up. Not just asking questions at the end of the interview. That's a given. You need to ask questions at the end of the interview, and ask questions that are relevant, open, solid, thoughtful questions. Don't ask questions that you can find on the website. Don't ask about housing. Don't ask about financial aid. Don't ask about career services. That's actually very, very taboo lately. Don't ask about career services. Don't talk about what your job prospects are going to be. These are things you can find on the website. Ask questions that, again, are open-ended about, if you're talking to an AdCom, ask about, curriculum changes that might happen. Ask about the best resources. Ask students about the best advice they received. Ask them about their background. Ask them why they chose that school. Finally, make certain that you thank the interviewer for their time and attention. Shake their hand again. Remember, medium shake. Even you don't have to shake while you're on Skype, but shake the hand at the end of the interview. And tell me what you think. We're going to take a poll on this. Is the best way to thank your interviewer? Linda, can you launch the poll?
I just did.
Okay.
Okay, and the options are: I plan to thank my interviewer in person. I plan to thank my interviewer in person and or by email. I plan to thank my interviewer in person and or by snail mail. I plan to thank my interviewer in person and or SMS/tweet. Okay, and again, you guys are marvelous. You're really voting. Okay, let's get it up. A few more votes. We're at 70%. Can we get it up to 80? 73%. A few more votes. I'm going to count to 5, and then I'm going to close the poll. We are getting more. A couple more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 78% voted. You guys are fantastic. And here are the results. So 3% plan to thank their interviewer in person only. 76% plan to thank the interviewer in person and or by email. 14% plan to thank the interviewer in person and or by snail mail. And 7% plan to thank the interviewer in person and or by SMS tweet.
Okay. All right. My suggestion is that you not only thank the interviewer at the end of the interview, but then you follow up with an email or a snail mail within 24 hours, and that you mention something you discussed in the interview. For example, you may have discussed sailing, so mention that in the thank you note, and then you'll be the sailing person, and they'll remember you when they read your application 4 weeks later. So, so bring up something that you talked about in the follow-up, and that means that you need to ask them for a business card at the end of the interview so that you have their email or their address. I personally prefer emails, but there are some people that still like the bread and butter notes and like them on fancy paper, but that takes a while to get there. And because everything is electronic now, there's really nowhere to, they can scan it and put it in your file, but that takes an extra step. And I'm going to tell you right now, for those of you who put down tweets or SMS, no tweets or SMS. That is so taboo on a thank you. That just tells me you're lazy. And it may be what your generation does. It's certainly what my children do all the time. They will tweet and SMS me to death, but that is not appropriate for a thank you after an interview. Okay, with that, I would also like to thank you for your time and attention and remind you that case-based, team-based, non-blind interviews require some variation on the preparation. So you can learn what it takes to succeed in preparing for these interviews by contacting me, by contacting Linda, by contacting one of my colleagues, or chatting with us here on EXUDE.com. We'd love to help prepare you. Again, I keep plugging this, but we do have them. I think it's so important because these mock team-based discussions for Wharton are so, so valuable. And we have one coming up on November 7th. So if you're interested, please go to our website. And you can use coupon code MBA 25. The offer will, and actually for the Wharton TBD, it's going to end on November 16th because the interviews, the session is on November 17th. But for all other interviews, November 28th, or for any of the video essays. Okay, or you can contact Linda, Linda@EXUDE.com, or me, Natalie @EXUDE.com. Before we go to general crush, I would like to pick the lucky grand prize winner. Do you agree with me, Linda, or should we wait?
No, we should do it now. I think we should do it now. And I think to tell them exactly what it is.
All right, well, now I'm going to tell you what the prize is. The grand prize is a mock interview with me. It's worth $425.
35.
Interview. 35. And the first person to answer the following question will win the grand prize. What was today's 6th commandment of interviewing? First person.
First person. I'm watching.
Hopefully you took notes.
Demonstrate energy. That was it. That's right.
That was it?
Yep.
We have a winner.
We have a winner. It's Rami.
All right. So
Rami got it.
I'm sorry?
Rami got it.
Rami. Congratulations, Rami. Woo, woo, woo. I've got the sirens blowing. All right, Rami, contact me after this session. We'll set up a time for you to do the interview. And if you're interviewing in round 2 or 3, I will honor that as well. But just contact me so I have your name in my inbox, and that we can talk about what next steps will be. Okay? And remember that all of you do, everybody that stayed till the end receives the $25 off coupon. So just use the coupon code MBA25 for any other interview preparation service that we offer. And I'm happy to work with you. So thank you so much for attending the webinar. Please stick around for questions that you have for me.
They can post the questions now.
Yep.
Okay.
And
great.
type the question in the question box, and Linda will read it because I actually can't see the questions because I'm on full screen and it's something weird with Mac. So,
all right, we have a question here from Pratik. He asks, "How do I get the mail ID of the interviewer if my interview is on Skype?" He wants to. Thank you. It's a good question.
Okay. It's a great question.
Yeah.
Okay, so some schools don't give you the interviewer's name or ID. That's the whole thing. And so you may not know. I know a lot of people do get, I mean, for alumni interviews in particular, you'll know who you're interviewing with because you've got to contact that interviewer and you can look them up on LinkedIn. Some schools don't do it. You can call the admissions office and say, I'm interviewing on this day at this time. Is there any way you can give me the name of the interviewer? I will tell you that sometimes it might change at the end because somebody calls in sick, or, you know, if it's a student who's doing the interview, they might, you know, have a conflict, and so one of the staff fills in, or one of the staff has a meeting, so one of the students fill in. So the best thing to do would really be to call the admissions office, the reception desk, and find out who your interviewer is, and then you can just Google them, look them up on LinkedIn, or look them up in the staff directory of the school. Great question.
Right, and we have some other great questions here. Jenny asks, could you please give us some more examples of relevant questions at the end, as almost all information is on the school site?
Right, so that's why I'm saying open-ended questions are great, okay? So you would never know on the school site if they're making curricular changes, right? That's something that you would want to ask an AdCom. I love the question, what's the best advice you have for an incoming MBA? And that goes with alumni, with staff, with students. It's very open-ended. It lets the person talk. It gives you an idea of what is important to the school if they're giving you really good advice. Another question I like is, who are the best resources you would tell every first year, every student to go to? Who are the best? And that's a good question for, again, alumni, staff, and for students. Who are the best resources? Keep these open-ended. Again, for students and alumni, ask them a little bit more about their backgrounds. It's completely irrelevant for admissions committee members to ask them what their background is, because I would have told you that, well, I had been a student at my school that I was working at when I changed schools. I have an MBA, I took a lot of strategy classes and I took a lot of marketing classes, but that's about it. That's about all I would tell you. And not every admissions director has an MBA. In fact, probably only 30% of the admissions directors have MBAs. So it may not be relevant to you. Just really open-ended, great questions. I actually have a list of questions that I give my clients, but who are the best professors? It doesn't matter what they call the class, just take the best professors. And you can't do that in the core because they just assign you the core courses, but you can do that for your electives. And I wound up having 2 classes with the late C.K. Prahalad, who is the mastermind behind the Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. And so before he even wrote that article and wrote the book that goes along with it, with Stu Hart, who was also a professor of mine, I got to learn about that in class. I mean, that was amazing to me. And I loved him so much that I took a second class from him. He was really a strategy guru, and unfortunately passed away way too young. But that was what I was told. These are the professors to take. Those were the professors I took. And I had a great experience at school. So great that I wound up staying. So wound up staying in admissions for 19 years, implementing projects that I did on a research project. So, these kind of open-ended questions are the ones that you want to ask. Linda, I don't know if you have others that you want to share.
Well, the main one I thought of was, what was your favorite class, especially for a student or alumni interviewer? That one, I think it's a real good one. It gets them talking, and it could be useful information if you get accepted. Other ones, just in general, well, you don't want to have everything on the, that's easily found on the site. Again, is you might want to ask something that's specifically related to your goal. Like, I know, a lot of people participate in this particular activity. Are your friends enjoying it? What do they like best about it? That kind of thing. I would not ask questions where you're kind of trying to dig up dirt. What's the class you hated? I don't think that's appropriate to ask. Would you agree, Natalie?
Yes.
Okay, and then somebody else.
And that's something you'll find out after you've been offered admission. That's something you can find out during the hosting weekends, the admit student weekends. You can dig up dirt during them, and then all bets are off.
Right, but then you're already accepted.
Right.
So, now, Kalyani is asking something. Is it okay to ask for interview feedback and any improvement areas at the end of the interview?
Oh, that is a great question.
Isn't it?
It is a great question. No, it is not okay to ask for interview feedback, not when you're in the middle of the process. So the best thing that you can do is try to read. There are people that will give you feedback without asking for it. I just don't think that it's a good idea to ask for feedback. If you wind up getting waitlisted, you can ask. They may or may not give you that feedback. They may give it to you in a very general way because they don't want to tell you, oh, it was the interview that actually put you on the wait list. But no, in the interview itself, it shows to me a lack of confidence. And you need to exude confidence. That was one of our commandments.
That's right. That's right. Okay, here's a really, I think another excellent question. You guys are asking fantastic questions. Kasumita asks, and if I mispronounce somebody's name, please forgive me. What is the difference between the answer to the question, tell us about yourself, and the question, walk me through your resume?
Great question. This is something I do with my clients all the time. Okay, they're actually quite similar. The tell me about yourself question, I always have people go a little into their background a little bit more. So this is where I grew up. This is, things that triggered me to go to this particular school. Walk me through my resume, starts at school and then follows yourself up. The other thing is the transitions if you've had more than one job should be very positive transitions. So for both of those questions. So each transition should be, I just did this with a client last night, so it's very, very, familiar in my mind. But where she was saying, oh, I dead-ended at this job. I've learned as much as I could, and I dead-ended. I'm sorry. If you've been with one company for 2 years, there is no way you can dead-end at that company. There's always something to learn. So what we did was we flipped that a little bit on its side and said, but this other company offered me the opportunity to do X, Y, and Z, which was different than her initial company did. And so we changed those transitions. But really, the difference, going back to your original question, is that you just start a little bit more in terms of your background. This is where I grew up. I traveled a lot when I was young, so I got to see a lot of cultures, or, I grew up on a farm, or, something that's, will give them some insight into your background. I know some people like to use the tell me about yourself as characteristics. I would save that question for like either the strengths and weaknesses question that they'll ask, or some schools will ask a wrap-up question like, why should we admit you, or what are the things you're going to bring to our program? And that's where I would use characteristics and traits. I wouldn't waste it on a tell me about yourself. I think they're very, very similar questions. I just would start a little earlier in your life than college for the tell me about yourself than I would walk me through your resume.
Okay, we're going to take one more question and then we're going to wrap it up. Marco asks, I'm 28 years old, a journalist from Cape Town, and I wrote a book on South African sports leaders earlier this year. The book reached bestseller status in September, and I regard the book as my biggest professional achievement and strongest differentiator in my application. Would it be appropriate to take the book along to my interview and I guess offer it as a gift to the interviewer?
I would talk about it, and I would give it as the thank you, with thank you note, like it as a thank you. Mm-hmm. You can, and I've had clients do this as well, because it, particularly if they make things for their business, I have them send, this is the one time that I'll have them send snail mail or FedEx or whatever, is I would send it as part of the thank you and not take it. Like one of the things that they have limited time. You know, these are 30 to 45-minute questions or 45-minute sessions. If you're with an alum, it might be longer, but I think it makes for a great thank you note. And again, helps them remember you when you're interviewing 4 weeks later. And if you are interviewing with an alum, thank them with the book. And I would also send a copy to the admissions committee and say, I wanted to let you know that I discussed this book with my interviewer so-and-so. It is one of my best accomplishments, and I would love for you to have a copy of it. So I think it makes for a great thank you gift without it being a gift, because they're really not allowed to take gifts.
Okay. Now, you know, we have a few more. We're actually out of time, but we have a lot of questions still here. Do you want to extend this maybe? I have to go soon, but I do have a few more minutes. Do you want to extend it, Natalie, a little bit?
What I would love to do is take these questions offline. You can email me at natalie@exude.com, because I actually do have an appointment that I have to get to.
All right.
And I'm sorry about that, but I do want to thank you for your time and attention, and I hope you found the session helpful. And I tried to get in as much information as I could to a wide audience. But again,
I think the audience would agree that you did a great job.
Thank you.
And
I want to wish you luck on your interviews as well, and luck on your applications. And
yeah, we're getting the thank yous are coming in. The thank yous are coming in from the audience. 4B, Francis, AB, and I want to add to them, Natalie. Thank you very much for doing this. Thank you to the audience for being here, for giving us your time and your wonderful questions and attention. And I want to repeat the offer, $25 off by November 28th. Now, the original offer was strictly for MBA interview services, but since most of you are not ready to interview yet, I just realized that I'm going to extend it to any MBA service, okay? So again, use coupon code MBA25 by November 28th. You get $25 off any MBA service, except non-rush service. And
questions I'll take at natalie@exude.com. I'm going to have to get to them later on this afternoon, because I do need to run off to an appointment.
All right.
So, all right. Thank you all so much. Good luck. And
good luck with your applications.
I look forward to speaking with you again. Take care.
Take care.